Chapter 7. Liam was pleasantly surprised to find a full set of riding gear waiting for him in his room. He had wondered if he had old jeans to wear, but preferred the riding breeches, shirt, and coat that had been provided for him. The riding boots were the best he had ever worn. As he dressed, he thought he hadn't worn proper riding clothes since his childhood. He found himself remembering growing up in Bucknell Manor. He had a proper outfit for everything, and he and Lucas were always made to match. They had taken up riding very young because Liam begged his father to let them. Lucas had learned the proper riding form and horse etiquette, but never seemed to enjoy it the way Liam did. Liam had found an entirely new sense of freedom while riding. He loved to take his horse and let it run loose at top speed. The freedom to take his horse out and let it run free while he sat on its back was like nothing else he had ever experienced. He remembered his favorite horse had been named Samson. He was dark brown and muscular. He was a young stallion, and his wild heart matched Liam's. When he rode him, it was as if they shared one mind and one body. He was constantly reprimanded by the stable master and his father, but he continued to ride free anyway. He was a young lord, so no one really tried to enforce rules with him. As a child, he was happiest when riding. One spring, his cousin the king had come for a visit. He wanted to go riding, and Lucas and Liam accompanied him. Liam was proud to show off his horse and his riding skills that he had acquired. The king had always spoiled his young cousins and showered them with gifts. He loved proper young Englishmen and felt they embodied the best of his kingdom. They were the epitome of proper English breeding. He marveled at the speed and daring young Liam showed with his horse. He thought it was the finest steed he had ever seen. Young Liam looked to be a natural equestrian. He spoke with Liam's father about how impressed he was with the proper rearing he was showing his family. He then spoke of how impressed he was with Liam's horse, and alluded to the fact that it would make a fine gift. His father couldn't deny the king his request, and gifted him the horse. Liam felt the sting of the tears he was trying to hold back as he watched his horse being led away. Even so young, he understood that you could not say no to the king. He was heartbroken now, and he spent the night in his horse's old stable, still smelling the horse he had loved. He considered running away and stealing his horse back. The two of them would ride the countryside freely, and running from the guard who would surely hunt them. In the end, though, he knew his duty was to serve the king and accepted his fate. When he was older and called to court, he asked the king about whether he still had the old horse. It took the king a few moments to recall what he was talking about. It had been many years. He told Liam that the horse couldn't be controlled and had thrown him one day. He decided it would never be controlled properly and had the stable hand put it down immediately. Liam hated him in that moment. As he finished dressing, he realized he had not ridden in centuries, and he had never had another horse like Samson. He started downstairs and wondered what kind of horse he would have today. He also made a mental note to ask Sawyer about the time. He was sure they had been gone for hours, but when they returned, it had only been a few minutes. They walked out of the door towards the stables, and Liam said to Sawyer, "Thank you for the riding clothes. It's been so long since I've worn proper riding clothes." She was also wearing riding clothes and boots. "You're welcome. I trust everything fits all right," she asked. "Everything fits perfectly." She smiled and said, "Good. Then let's hope we have luck with the horses today." "I notice we don't have riding crops. Is there a reason?" he asked as they walked. "We don't hit our horses," she said. "How do you control them or command them?" he asked. "I don't. I let them guide me, and we go where they want," she answered like it was common knowledge, and a little confused as to how he rode. "You never had a problem like that?" he asked, and was now the one confused. "Never," she said. They had reached the stables, and he could see things were definitely done differently here. There was no fencing, and the horses milled about. Some were grazing, and some were slowly walking around, and none seemed concerned about their presence. He watched as the horse came running down the hill at top speed straight for them. They walked into the stables, and he found there was no stalls. There were troughs and hay where the stalls should be, but no stalls. A young man came walking out of the tack room and greeted them. "Good morning, miss." "Good morning, sir. Have you come for some riding today?" he asked. "Good morning, Miles," she greeted him warmly. "We have indeed. Let's hope the horses feel the same," she said and laughed. "Good morning," Liam replied. "How rude. I'm sorry. Miles, this is one of my guests, Liam," she said, introducing him. "It's nice to meet you," Liam said, Miles. "Has the horse picked you yet?" "Do you mean have I picked a horse yet?" Liam asked, confused. Sawyer and Miles laughed. "No, I meant it, did a horse pick you? But I will let Sawyer explain as I get the saddles ready in case you get lucky, he said, walking away chuckling. Come, let's go outside and I'll explain what he meant, she said, and they walked back outside. Sawyer waved her hand and all the horses turned and came walking towards them. The big spotted stallion who had been running down the hill at them sauntered over. When they were close enough, Sawyer began speaking to them. Good morning, friends. My friend and I would like to ride you this morning and wondered if any of you would honor us, she asked, and Liam was stunned. He almost started laughing, except the spotted horse came and started sniffing him intently. A white mare came and nuzzled Sawyer's hand, and she reached up and petted her nose. I would be honored to ride you this morning, Sawyer said to the horse, and the horse walked to the stable to be saddled. Liam was amazed, and his spotted horse slowly walked around him, sniffing him, and finally started nuzzling his hand. Liam reached to pet him, and Sawyer said, and asked Sawyer, does this mean he picked me? Sawyer looked shocked. Yes, and you should be honored. He has never chosen to be ridden before, she said. How can it be he's never been ridden? Who broke him? Asked Liam. Liam, we do not break horses, and we let them choose whether they want to be ridden. I have come on some days, and none of them are in the mood to be ridden. Your boy there has never been in the mood. He likes to run and won't let anyone on him. You should feel honored he trusts you, she said. Can you talk to them? He asked. Not with words, but I can feel their energy and they can feel mine. They understand our intent and I understand theirs, she answered. What is his energy saying? Liam asked, stroking the horse's back as he spoke. He feels connected to you and believes you will know how to ride him. He's always been afraid that his power will overwhelm any rider, but he feels like you can handle it. He also likes your scent, she said. Liam looked at the horse and said, I like yours too. Shall we get you saddled? The horse reared his head in agreement and walked toward the stables. Liam was happy to walk next to the horse and noticed he didn't have to lead it. He was excited to see what the horse could do. They rode together for a short time at a slow pace, but soon Sawyer could see Liam and the horse were both restless. She watched as horse and rider both measured how the other moved, and within minutes their movements were in fluid synchronicity. She decided they should be set free. They were only being polite. She told Liam she wanted to head back, her horse was done, that he should continue to ride as long as he wanted. He couldn't say goodbye fast enough. She watched as the horse took off into a full run. Liam smiled for the first time since she had met him as he leaned back into the wind with the horse. As she was walking away from the stables back towards the house, she caught a glimpse of the horse running at top speed back up a hill. Liam and the horse's movement looked as if they were one, and she thought he looked happy. When she entered the house, Hunter was sitting at the bottom of the steps waiting for Liam. When she saw Sawyer enter alone, she got annoyed. Where's Liam? She asked. He's still riding. I suspect he will be riding for a while longer, Sawyer answered. Really? I've never seen him express an interest in riding before, Hunter said, honestly surprised. He was born in a much different time than you, Hunter. I suspect he forgot how much he used to enjoy it. Now, excuse me, I have to change before I meet Lucas, she said, and felt sorry for her. She was sure that finding out something new about Liam only made Hunter feel more insecure than she already did. She walked up her past the stairs and realized that Hunter loved a man she had never really truly gotten to know. It should be wonderful to find out something new about your lover. Instead, she looked devastated. Hunter did indeed feel more insecure. Obviously, Liam liked riding so much he'd stayed behind and forgotten all about her. When they had gone riding this morning, Hunter sneaked into Sawyer's room. Brexley decided to go to the pool outside, and Hunter wanted to snoop. She hoped she might find something to use against Sawyer, but had come up empty-handed. When she walked into her room, she was awestruck by Sawyer's bed. It was a beautiful canopy bed draped with cloth on all four posts, and had beautiful flower vines growing throughout the lattice on the back and across the top. It was the biggest bed she had ever seen, and guessed it could sleep 6 people without them ever touching. It must have been custom made for her. She opened drawers and looked in closets, but found nothing interesting. She didn't know what she was looking for exactly, but she was disappointed not to find anything of interest. As she rode the elevator down, it stopped on the 5th floor and Cassia got in. She immediately noticed the main button floor had already been pushed and figured out Hunter was coming down, not going up. She deduced that Hunter had been on the 6th floor, and there was only one reason for that. Did you find anything interesting up there? She asked Hunter and pointed up. I don't know what you're talking about. I pushed the wrong number on the elevator by accident, Hunter replied, trying to sound innocent. Yes, I'm sure the clearly labeled numbers on the elevator must have been very confusing, Cassia said sarcastically. The doors opened at the top of the stairway, and Hunter shot Cassia a dirty look and walked out. Cassia smiled knowingly at her, and Hunter sat at the bottom of the step to wait for Liam to return. She was certain Liam was the one who would be chosen as Sawyer's soulmate. Sawyer was surprised to see Lucas already in the music room when she came in. I'm glad to see you found it all right, she said. He smiled and said, one of the maids found me wandering aimlessly and helped me. I'm pretty sure I would still be lost if she hadn't found me. This place is like a maze. Well, I'm glad you found it, she said. Now, what instrument would you like today? He was looking around the room when she had come in. The enormous room was filled with every musical instrument imaginable, and he had been awestruck. The biggest symphony in the world didn't have this many instruments. He had been admiring a collection in a glass case on the wall when he had come in. He pointed at a very old guitar that reminded him of one he had once long ago. I would love to try this one, but it looks so old I wouldn't want to ruin it, he said wistfully. Sawyer walked over to the glass case and opened it. I think they are being ruined by never being played, she exclaimed. I would rather it crumble in your fingers being used for the purpose it was created for than to just sit and be admired. Good point. Where did all these come from anyway, he asked. The Fae have collected them throughout history, she said, and grabbed his arm and started pulling him to another case. Come and look at these. They are my favorite. Lucas looked into the glass and was amazed. Inside was an ancient drum. It was crudely covered in an animal skin, and the hollow wood had been roughly carved out. Next to it was something that looked like a flute. It was a small tree branch that looked like it had a mouthpiece and finger holes. Next to them were other old instruments that looked like the blueprints for more modern instruments. Sawyer opened the case and slid her hand over the skin of the drum. These are the first instruments Mother collected. She was thrilled when the humans began to make music. She said it gave her hope for them. I often imagine people sitting around the fire the first time this was played. Ancient hands made this, and we stand here today looking at the only remnant that they ever existed. Their names have been lost to time, and their bloodline may never have continued, yet something of this person remains. This flute is the first of its kind, and I like to imagine this is where all of music began. Someone picked it up and blew into the hollow wood. See how it grew naturally hollow? They must have blown into a stick and heard a note. They imagined more notes, and so this was made. Can you imagine being the first person to do anything so extraordinary? We don't often think enough of the curiosity that provided us with everything we know. Music did not exist, it was created. We know the names of famous musicians, but we don't know the names of the people who created it. An entire movement started with these very instruments, and we stand here and merely look at them. Let's take them out and hear where music was started. Let's listen to the crude noises they make and see if we can't just for a moment hear what they did, she said, and grabbed the flute. He took out the drum and they sat on the floor and tried to play. Neither instrument sounded like its modern day equivalent, and it took them a while to figure out how to even begin to play it. They laughed and talked as they practiced and were finally able to make something that resembled a tune. Sawyer suggested next time that they play them outside because they were invented to be heard outside and not indoors. Lucas led the idea and they agreed tomorrow they would play them in the garden. Their time together went by too quickly. As they put the instruments back in the case, Sawyer turned to Lucas, and he spoke first. Thank you, Sawyer. That was really incredible, he said almost shyly. I couldn't have done it without you. I have always wanted to play these, but didn't have anyone to play with, she told him. I'm glad I could help. So same time tomorrow, he asked. Yes, but let's meet here so we can carry these outside. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go, she said and walked out of the room. Lucas watched as she left and sat down on one of the chairs. He loved the way she thought. When she was describing his theory of how music started so long ago, he got caught up in the story. He allowed himself a small glimmer of hope that maybe he was the one. She rushed down the hallways and staircase. She was almost late to meet Marcus. She found him sitting quietly in a chair by a small table. He had poured himself a glass from a decanter and had set a glass for her. She sat down opposite him, and he poured her a drink. This is an incredible whiskey. What is it? He asked. She picked up her glass and sipped it. It is from Glenavon Distillery in Scotland. It's the oldest known whiskey in the world, she said casually. He stopped with the glass halfway to his lips and lowered it. Shouldn't we be saving this for a special occasion then? She laughed and took another drink before answering. This is a special occasion. Besides, Astrid had like 10 cases of it in the cellar. She was once in love with the owner of the distillery and took this as her parting gift. It was his turn to laugh. I guess she won't miss it then. No, I doubt she will. Would you like to play chess or discuss history? He said, returning to his normal seriousness. I would love to hear about the first attempt to take Britannia. If you don't mind talking history today, she asked. I do not mind. I was there and I would love to give you my theories on why it failed. They continued to sip at their drinks and had a lengthy conversation about the campaign. They discussed strategy, and Sawyer quickly learned Marcus had an incredible head for warfare. They had great debates on certain strategies, and Marcus was delighted when he had to concede a point to Sawyer. He loved intellectual conversation and found her worthy of it. The time passed by so quickly that they lost track of it, and when she finally noticed the clock, 3 hours had passed. Look at the time, Marcus, she exclaimed. I'm afraid I have to go meet Julius. We will have to continue this tomorrow, she said, and got up hurriedly. He nodded, and as she was leaving the room, he called out, May I give you some advice? She turned at the doorway and said, Yes, of course. Julius isn't a big conversationalist at first. He will warm up soon enough, but don't be disappointed if he isn't very talkative at first. He said, knowing his brother could be hard to get to know. Thank you, Marcus. I will keep that in mind, she said, and left. Marcus had been certain he knew who her soulmate was going to be. They had all thought Lucas the best candidate, but after today he hoped it could be Julius. He deserved someone like her. Julius and Sawyer arrived at the exact same time. He was coming down the stairway as she was coming up the hallway. She looked up at him and smiled. Are you ready to see my favorite place? She asked brightly. He was astounded by how comfortable she was around him. Women were always guarded around him, and for good reason. Sawyer held no such pretense. He knew his reputation was well earned, and had grown used to people feeling fear in his presence. In fact, he felt power from their fear and cultivated it. Sawyer, though, felt none of this fear and spoke to him easily. It caught him off guard. Lead the way, he answered. They went outside, and as soon as she stepped out the door, she kicked off her shoes. I know you prefer to be barefoot, he stated. I love it. When the energy comes up through my feet, there's no better feeling in the world, she answered. She led them into a sea of flowers. It went on past where the eyes could see, and as they walked, she let her fingertips gently run across the flowers. He could smell the flowers. He could see the flowers straining forward for her touch, and the smell in the air overpowered everything else. I notice you do not keep flowers in your home. I would have thought you had vases filled in every room with them, he said curiously. As soon as a flower is cut, the life force begins to fade. It will be like having a graveyard in my house. Besides, if I want them indoors, I can make them grow. Once, when I was only 3, Luna was going crazy because I kept overflowering the whole house with them. It looked like a jungle. Mother had to be brought in to make me stop, she said, laughing at the memory. So this is your favorite place, then, he asked. No. I love it here, and I walk through it every evening. But my favorite place is somewhere else, she said, and noticed the sun starting to fade into the horizon. Does this garden lead to your favorite place, then, he asked, getting frustrated by her vagueness. This garden leads to everywhere, she said cryptically, and then they came upon a door. He recognized the door from last night and said, Are we going to the ocean, then? She turned to him and offered her hand. When he took it, she answered yes, but not the same one. The door opened and they stepped inside. They were standing at the very edge of a tall cliff. It overlooked the ocean, but was so high it looked tiny. It was night here, and the moon lit up the sky with bright light. They were so high up, the moon looked closer to them than normal. The wind blew, and the night air smelled like salt. He looked around and saw no buildings or electric light in the distance. The sea itself looked black, and he could hear the waves crashing against the rocks below. The sound of the waves was loud, but seemed far away. It was loud yet quiet here, and it felt like they were the only 2 people in the world right now. They stood in a comfortable silence for a long time while he took the time to appreciate his surroundings. He finally broke the spell and spoke. Tell me why this is your favorite place, he asked. There are so many reasons, she answered quietly. Then tell them all to me. Okay, I will try. One is obvious, because it's so beautiful here. There's no other place on this planet quite so beautiful to me as this one. It also has so much energy here, and when it flows through me, I can feel the power of the life force. If I'm sad, I can come here and the world makes sense again. Sometimes, if I come and stand quietly for long enough and clear my mind of all thought, I can feel my soulmate here. His soul cries out to mine, and if only for a moment he can feel me. It is such a comfort to know he exists, and I believe for a split second he knows I exist. I feel his loneliness, and I would give anything to reassure him that his unhappiness is almost over. Julius looked at her when she finished speaking. She had tears streaming down her face, and he put an arm around her to pull her close and comfort her. He had not meant to make her cry. You will very soon. We're all here, and you're almost to the finish line, he said. I know that even as we stand here, I feel him and his pain. She finally stopped crying and laid her head on his shoulder. He was angry at himself for making her cry and was sure none of the other men had made her cry today. They stood for a very long time like that, wordlessly watching the moon and lost in their own thoughts. She knew they should go, but she finally felt peaceful and just didn't want it to end. He also knew they should go, but like her, he hadn't felt a sense of peace in a very long time. So they just stood and let themselves become lost in the moon. A sprinkle of rain brought them out of it quickly. They tried to hurry back to the door, but a crack of thunder sounded, and as they were caught in the downpour just before they got to the door. As they came back through the door, they were soaking wet. The moon was high in the sky when they returned, and they realized they had been gone for hours. When they walked into the house, everyone was waiting for them in the foyer. They had become concerned when they realized the duo had been gone for hours. Where have you two been? We've been worried, exclaimed Cassia. But before they could answer that question, another came at them. Is it raining out there? You're drenched, said Lucas. With that, they both just erupted into laughter. We had been in Ireland. Now, if you will excuse us, I think we both need to dry off and change, Sawyer answered. They headed up the stairs to the elevator. Sawyer's revelation had shocked them all into temporary silence. As the door closed, she heard Brexley exclaim, Did she just say they were in Ireland?